Crypto policy can sometimes feel distant from the people actually building, investing, or using the technology. Most people encounter it through a headline about a bill, a court case, or a new rule. But behind those headlines is a much slower process, people trying to explain emerging technology to policymakers, translate policy back to builders, and create rules that protect people without accidentally breaking what is being built. Today on Token for Your Thoughts, we're joined by Rashan Colbert, Director of US Policy at the Crypto Council for Innovation. Rashan has seen this issue from several sides. He worked in the US Senate, built policy strategy at dYdX, and now works for the Crypto Council for Innovation to bring industry, policymakers, and technical experts into the same conversation. Rashan, welcome to Token for Your Thoughts.
Lindsay, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's really great to have you on the show. I'm really excited about our conversation today. And to start with, like always, it would be great to just hear a bit more about yourself. What were you doing before you entered the crypto world, and what originally pulled you towards politics, public policy, and government work?
Yeah, sure. Well, okay. Let's see. So the full background. I mean, I've been, more or less around the crypto ecosystem for 10 years now. Starting off with just personal stuff, but I'll go a little bit back further. I started off in DC, getting involved in politics as an intern, which is very, very typical. Kind of the entry move for many professions, of course, but definitely federal politics in the U.S. And started off as an intern in Congresswoman Judy Chu's office. She's a House Representatives member from Southern California. And that was great. Really got exposure to the way Congress actually worked, and had some fantastic senior staffers there who I got to know and admired the work that they did, for the country and for their constituents. And so I said, hey, how do I do this? How do I get where you are? How do I do this full time? And they recommended, I don't know, we'll help you, give you some recommendations, or campaigns can work. And then the representative for my home district, which is in Northern Virginia, was retiring after, I think, 24, 25 years in Congress.
Wow.
And so there's going to be a big race. And so I left the office to go work for one of the candidates in a big Democratic primary. And that went well. We won the primary, and
Nice.
I stayed on for general. We won the general, but then I actually left and went to another campaign. Went to a presidential campaign for this guy Martin O'Malley, who was governor of Maryland at the time, and he ran for president as a sort of a third contender after Hillary Clinton and Senator Bernie Sanders. And there's Martin O'Malley, and that was an amazing campaign, a great candidate, and a really great team around him. I got to learn a lot and go all across country and go to Iowa and New Hampshire and do the whole presidential thing. And we did. He did not become the president, but it was still a great experience. After that, I worked in Senator Cory Booker's office, senator from New Jersey, doing research and I did some comms work and ultimately legislative work for him. I was there for about 7 years. And that's when I started to really, learn a lot about frontier technology and crypto. I read this book called Digital Gold by Nathaniel Popper, which was really brought crypto to life for me. This was 2016. I'd followed the price a little bit of Bitcoin, but really didn't dive too deep in technology or the ecosystem. But this book made the world come to life. And so then I, like many people, I was quote unquote orange pilled, I guess, in Bitcoin. and I dove all the way in, and I read everything and read the white paper and talked to anyone who would give me a minute. And I got really into Ethereum, which was still relatively new at the time, and got really plugged in online and on Twitter, and Then I had a really short-lived liquid fund investing in crypto around 2018. It mainly liquid tokens. So at the time, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, Zcash, Monero, Ripple, a few names like that. Uh,
Hmm.
and some tokens that aren't really very relevant anymore as well.
Right.
Um, but that we shut down operations because of sort of where we were on the regulatory banking conversation and the ambiguity that existed in the space at the time. But that put me in a good position, understanding some of the pain points for folks building in the space,
Yeah.
to continue and become someone working on these problems within the U.S. Senate for Cory Booker, and who also sat in the Senate Agriculture Committee. And so I got to be a part of some of the earlier conversations for market structure legislation, um, looking on digital commodities. This is around 2021, 22. And then after that, I left and went to dYdX trading. Worked at this leading DeFi protocol doing work on perps. So I've kind of gone a little past just the beginning, but
Uh,
yeah, I guess that's the basic background.
okay, awesome. So right out the gate, you were like internship into sort of the political world. Is that always what you wanted to do?
Man, no, I don't know. What I want to do is so many different things.
Yeah.
Sports were big for me, and I played soccer. I played soccer in college, and so of course I wanted to do that. And
Yes.
like many people, I wanted to be an astronaut or something like that,
Cool. Yeah.
and do lots of cool things. But then my dad was a career military officer, and so thought about doing that. And
Okay.
he actually for a time worked with NASA. We lived in southern Florida, not southern Florida, but
Wow.
in Florida. And got to see a lot of space shuttle launches and meet some astronauts. And so I really got into that part
Very
of the
cool.
world. And I got to do some space policy as well when I was worked for
Yeah.
Senator Booker. So yeah, that was, I guess my adult contribution to the space effort.
Very cool. Awesome. And yeah, you mentioned you worked on the presidential campaign and with lots of traveling. That sounds like it would be a lot of hard work, but also like could be very exhilarating at the same time. What was your favorite part about being part of that campaign?
Yeah, so actually, I didn't give you my whole presidential story. I worked on two presidentials. So I worked
Oh,
on
okay.
O'Malley's in the 16 cycle, but I also was Senator Booker's body man in his presidential race. So that was for the 2020 race election. So a lot of that was 2019. But in
Hmm.
that role in particular, I got to go all over the country, right by the senator's side and kind of see the campaign from the middle. Um,
Wow.
and so both incredible opportunities where I did get to see the whole country from a relatively unique vantage point, and
Yeah.
so and I think that vantage point was from, the middle seat in the back of a lot of airplanes and in the back seat of lots of people's generous people's vehicles who would take us place to place, and also from the rec centers and church pews and from living rooms of people's homes all over the country. And so a really unique way to see places coast to coast, but a lot of Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and
Hmm.
Nevada, but also lots of other states, where we got to
Yeah.
just spend time with regular people,
Hmm.
which and be welcomed as guests in people's homes, which was very special and very
Hmm.
unique experience. So I think I just got uh, a lot of empathy for parts of the country that aren't
Hmm.
necessarily where I'm from, and just get to see how people live their lives day to day, but also what are the most pressing concerns and what are
Hmm.
the challenges that they bring up when somebody comes to town that represents um, the government, and represents the future,
Yeah.
and and can maybe change some of the things in their lives. And so that was, an invaluable experience, both occasions, but where I got to just learn a lot about the country.
Yeah, that sounds really incredible to experience so much of the country, but as you say, to sort of gain that deeper understanding. Because I can imagine even if I mean, most of us, we spend most of our times in our own communities, which are their own bubbles. But even if you travel, it can still be a bubble. Like you're at a hotel or you're with other people who are on vacation. You're not sort of, going down in neighborhoods, chatting
Exactly.
with people, especially about deeper things. So yeah, I've had, like you said, really unique experience and kind of incredible to have that knowledge and understanding of like our country.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think on a different perspective, learnings like as a professional, like it's incredible. Like I said, I was Senator Booker's body man in this very specific role. You kind of
Hmm.
just or do whatever you need to do, but getting to see him operate day after day in such an intense pace and scenario, but with excellence and with such a human, thing about him.
Hmm.
Like that was the real thing. Like obviously, like you know, these very successful people, like presidents, senators, CEOs, what have you. They're very sharp and very accomplished, but they don't necessarily have to be great people.
Hmm.
But I think I've seen that it is possible to maintain your humanity while also operating at a million miles per hour, and that was a really good thing for me to learn.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a really, really good takeaway from that. Yeah, lucky to work with someone like that too. Um, so, what would you say working inside government has taught you about how policy actually gets made that people outside Washington might often miss?
Sure, sure. I think a couple, many things, but um, a couple that I'll highlight here are that one. Um, Passing or creating, crafting, moving forward, advocating for policy, in particular, passing legislation is hard. Full stop. It's just an incredibly difficult endeavor
Mhm.
that is um, extremely comprehensive and manifold in its inputs, right?
Mhm.
There has to be, there has to be a political appetite for something to happen. There often has to be some sort of intense problem that is identifiable, and that's why this has risen to the need for federal legislation to solve it.
Mhm.
They're in an industry like crypto or other kind of commercial spaces. There needs to be a certain level of buy-in often from the industry, which
Mhm.
is difficult to wrangle in itself. You need people in the majority and the minority who want this. You
Mhm.
usually need an administration that also wants this to happen. And
Mhm.
then you kind of need to work really, really hard to actually craft the words on the page and deliver them and deliver version after version after version after version that is inclusive of the needs to solve the problem, that is honed adequately enough to um, make lots of different folks somewhat happy. But I say somewhat because I've heard someone say that a good legislation usually leaves both sides a little bit disappointed because that's how you know that you've reached a pretty adequate compromise, right? And so that's another piece too. You have to be ready to take a lot of arrows in the process, and because whatever you kind of put forward, there will be people who support an idea and who oppose an idea, and so just you have to be ready to taking part in this endeavor for difficulty. It's just hard. And the other key thing that I'd say that I'll share that I've kind of learned about this effort is that people in government in this case, we'll talk about people on the Hill because that's, what I know the best. Legislators, staff, uh, the experts who help them, the administration and operations type people who are all around the Capitol and the Capitol complex. These people are good people who work really hard. They're just regular people. They make much less money than many of their peers who also went to really fancy schools and have great ambitions um, than they do. And obviously you learn a lot doing the type of job, and it's great. But it really is, at least for some amount of time, and some people it becomes a full career. You are really a public servant that's looking to work for the people of the United States, the people of your state, the people of your local congressional district, and to serve them. And I think that it's easy to lose sight of that. Or I think for many people, who maybe have never been to Washington or spoken to a member of Congress or to their staffs for sure, they often don't really understand even the reality of what that is. That behind every member of Congress, there is there are legions of people who are often bright young people who come from all over the country who are sacrificing things to work hard on behalf of others. And so I think that those are the key things: the difficulty of passing legislation and the interesting quality of the people who choose to do that type of work.
Right. Yeah, and you mentioned it can take a long time. I guess in a sense, I suppose the plus side of that is that a lot of thought goes into a lot of the new legislation, like you were saying, to sort of try and so that it's beneficial to, I don't know, or equally, dissatisfying to both sides, or like you say, so, so it's fair. What does that look like in practice, when a piece of legislation is going through? Is it up to people in the industry to sort of, get their own representatives or lobbyists sort of in the room? Or is there sort of proactive outreach done on the policymakers' part? I was having a conversation with someone and they were saying, sometimes, companies can try and influence legislation that would be, disadvantageous to competitors, which I was like, oh my gosh, like what? Which, and so obviously, like if maybe the competitor isn't in the room and the person making the policy like isn't really up to speed, that wouldn't be great. So what does that look like in practice when, legislation's being made?
Yeah, no. So I'll actually address exactly that point of like whether you're in the room or not first, and then I'll go backwards and talk about kind of my perspective. Like there's an amazing line that's from someone, I don't know, smarter than me, that it's probably very famous, but I can't remember who exactly. It's, if you're not at the table, you are on the menu.
Oh yes, I've heard that one.
Yes. And so I think
Gosh,
that
yeah.
is extremely, extremely apt. Obviously, it's pretty cynical, but
Yeah.
I think that is basically true to an extent. Like it helps you understand sort of what's at stake, because when Congress or other legislative bodies decides that it is going to make a decision and craft legislation, obviously that writing laws means taking sides, right? You have an opinion about something, usually like a big problem in the world, and you want to help people be able to navigate through that problem. And so it is really important for there to be an adequate um, um, taking in and filtering and processing of information in order to do that job. I think that Congress is has many powers of obviously all in the service of writing laws, but one of the great powers of Congress is information gathering, and you can see kind of an homage to that in many ways. One of the key things is, the Library of Congress is one of the greatest collections of information in the world. And that's one of I think, the treasures of the United States. Pretty much
Hmm.
every book that's published, they get a copy, and they want to have a physical copy, and they put it somewhere across many different buildings and warehouses and et cetera. But you can also offer access a great amount of these things online. And when you're
Amazing.
staff, you have access to it. And an interesting piece about Library of Congress, it started from the personal collection of Thomas Jefferson.
Oh,
Thomas Jefferson,
really?
yeah, like one of our country's founders, a big lover of knowledge and information, and specifically books, which were much rarer things in his
Hmm.
time. And he, went into great debt actually to acquiring his enormous library.
Wow.
Uh, but one of the things that he ended up doing was giving the bulk of his library to the U.S. Congress to start the Library of Congress, and so the rest of the collection is built upon that. And so I think that not only does Congress have great access to existing sources of information like books and
Hmm.
academic documents and primary documents and governmental texts and et cetera, but also has a great ability to create new information, right? To do
Hmm.
studies and to that's one of the things that many pieces of legislation have is like, hey, like we're going to pass a law that says figure out how this thing actually works.
Hmm.
What's actually happening in practice for the people who are doing whatever thing out in the world. Um, we Congress has this thing called the Congressional Research Service, where they can research and create documentation that's useful for the drafting of laws as well internally. So that's excellent. And then uh, one of the superpowers of being a congressional staffer, this is why it's worth your time, I think, so you really can talk to anyone. So I had great experience being proactive about reaching out to people when I needed to understand something. And
Hmm.
that's the greatest academics on a given subject. That is titans of industry who are working in a specific space. That is uh, I said, academics,
Hmm.
industry, just trade groups who focus on something. That is random famous people or influencers that you see who want to talk about
Yeah.
something. So if you're working on sports policy, which is something I also did, you reach out to athletes. How are you actually
Very cool.
working on thinking about X, Y, and Z? And
Hmm.
people will respond. Crypto was really good about this. I reached out to a lot of people directly and said, hey, what's happening with this thing? How does this thing work? And people will
Hmm.
respond. And then the last piece on information gathering, you know, Congress has subpoena power. If you want information, someone has
Hmm.
it, they don't want to give it to you, you can compel them to do so.
I was just
And
going
so
to say, like, do they have to respond when you're emailing, like, whoever it
not,
is?
no one has
No.
responded to an email, but
Or,
a
yeah,
member
however
of
you reach out.
Congress can go through a process that will ultimately require someone to do so.
Okay. Yeah.
So by issuing a formal subpoena,
Okay.
or by passing a law that says these people have to give us this type of information, and lying to
Okay.
Congress is also a felony. So information gathering is really, really core. And that was part of a. Sorry, it's turning into a long-winded answer, but
No, not at all.
information gathering is key because that is the first and maybe most important part in crafting great legislation. You have to really know how the world works on a given thing. And so if you're not seeing how a specific community is responding to, whatever issue, then ultimately you will write legislation that is inadequate. And
Hmm.
so I think that it is kind of it works both ways. Members of Congress working on legislation must be proactive in
Hmm.
seeking the opinions and the information that they need. But everyone, whether it is industry or communities or individuals, when they know that something is being worked on, I feel like you have somewhat of a civic duty to make your experience and opinion known. If
Hmm.
you have key information, the doors and telephones work both ways. And so it's really important that people make their voice heard. I know it can sound almost cliche, and that we always should think about through voting lens, which is important. But even as folks are working on legislation, make sure that you're um, sharing your ideas and sharing your information. It's really important to making good law.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's really interesting to understand just the mechanics of how it works. And yeah, I don't think I knew that about the library. That sounds like a really cool place. That has,
Yeah, it's beautiful.
do you know how many books they have there? Sounds like a lot.
Oh, yeah, I have no idea, but I'm sure well, I'm sure ChatGPT could tell us
Yeah.
how
Um,
many books.
I remember doing a tour around. I have been there, but I can't remember if I did the library or not. But I love going to like big old libraries, so
Yeah,
definitely put that on my list.
their main reading room is beautiful and very,
Yeah.
and great, but they have books all over the area. So, okay, apparently there are 25.7 million cataloged books in
My
the Library of
gosh.
Congress, but it has more than 180 million total items, including books, manuscripts,
What?
maps, recordings, photographs, films, sheets of music, and other materials.
Whoa.
So it's got everything.
Oh my gosh, imagine being the librarian there in charge of all that.
Big job.
They're busy.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so let's talk about the Crypto Council for Innovation. How did you get involved in that? And for those of us who don't know, what is it? Why does it exist? What do you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the Crypto Council for Innovation is it's a trade association based in Washington, D.C., but with professionals all over the world. And it is focused on advocating for positive changes, and particularly at the policy arena,
Hmm.
that will encourage innovation in digital assets and blockchain based technology. And I said all over the world. So our base is here in Washington D.C., where we have a number of folks, but we have people in New York. We've had folks in California. We have someone in London, in Brussels, and in Hong Kong. And so we really
Awesome.
are a global organization, and
Hmm.
it's an alliance of some of the most prominent names in crypto, and across the entire ecosystem. So we have centralized exchanges like Coinbase and Kraken. We have venture capital investors like Andreessen Horowitz, Paradigm, Ledger Capital, Ribbit Capital. We have stablecoin issuers like Circle, Paxos, and PayPal. We have a bank, SoFi.
Hmm.
There's crypto native infrastructure providers like Layer Zero and dYdX, and Near Foundation, and a number of others. I'm sorry, I'm not. I'm gonna do someone a disservice by not naming them, but we have folks across the ecosystem, and many of them are extremely sophisticated, and they are all unified by the idea that they believe that positive, thoughtful regulation is a positive thing, for
Hmm.
the ecosystem, and will allow it to grow and flourish in the way that we really want it to.
Absolutely. And so when people hear crypto advocacy, um, you know, what does that look like day to day? What's happening? I guess.
Sure.
Hmm.
Yeah. No, it's multifaceted for
Hmm.
sure. And it is a great advocate here in Washington, D.C. told me this kind of adage. It's there's three steps. There's first educate, then advocate, then legislate. So most of a legislative process is that educational period, right? If people don't know you exist or understand what you're doing or why you're doing it, then you're not a part of the process. Just like talking about the information gathering process needed for legislation, it's our job to be proactive and help people understand how crypto works, how blockchains work, how
Hmm.
real people are interacting with the technology on a daily basis. And, because it's very possible to, if you don't see something, to think it doesn't exist. But the world is really big, and there's lots of people using this technology in creative and innovative ways all around the world. And so we try to do a good job of understanding how people are using it, understanding how our members in particular are using the technology and serving folks who want to use it. And then understanding what their pain points are. Where are the gaps in legislation really difficult for them?
Hmm.
Obviously there's a lot of ambiguity in the status quo. And so bringing those challenges and pain points up to legislators and to regulators is really important. The second piece with advocacy is, so okay, we understand who these people are and where they are and what they're doing, but why does this matter?
Hmm.
Really helping people why these pain points really mean something. And so here in the United States, that is who would benefit from creating a comprehensive regulatory framework for digital assets? Why is that good for our economy, for our society, et cetera, and helping people understand from their perspective as well. Some
Hmm.
people are in New York and some people are in California and some people are in Texas and Nebraska and all these different places. And so why does it matter to them individually? And the
Hmm.
last, piece of that is the legislating piece. And obviously the legislators are legislators, the people who are voted in by their constituents, but we want to be able to help them with the
Hmm.
technical components of, how do you actually solve this problem? Right. And
Hmm.
so our members are all really great and thoughtful, and we can help them make sure that their ideas are heard by legislators as they look to solve these problems.
Awesome. So you're effectively the person advocating on behalf of your members, giving them a presence when policy is being made and new legislation's coming through.
Yeah, that's a
Hmm.
part of it. So
Yeah.
yeah, we do a lot of things, and I think concretely, yes. Sometimes our job is to deliver that message on behalf of our members. Sometimes it's to stand alongside them,
Hmm.
and help them shape that message. And sometimes it's translating it through writing or other sorts of collateral that we can share with folks and make sure that they're educated and informed of all different perspectives. And oftentimes it's being creative, right? How can we
Yeah.
help our members achieve their goals, and really stand alongside them yeah, to deliver our shared goal.
Okay. And in terms of your members, is it like a certain type of company that you work with? Can anyone become a member? Yeah. What does that look like?
Yeah. So, like I said, we have this, broad range of members, and many of them are, sort of marquee names
Yeah.
in the space. And they come to us, or we go to them, and we try to see if we have shared values within this ecosystem and
Hmm.
shared goals, right? And I said, one of the core things that unites everyone is this belief, this genuine
Hmm.
belief that having legislation, having regulations are good, putting them in place and being thoughtful about them are good for, sure, individuals, businesses, but also for the broader ecosystem to help it flourish. So really finding and forging alignment with CCI staff and with our members is
Hmm.
really the goal of figuring out who's going to be a part of CCI or not.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So regulatory clarity is a phrase we hear constantly in crypto. In real terms, what problem is a founder or a product team or an everyday user facing when clarity doesn't exist?
Yeah, so there are many. But I'll say it at a high level, we need clarity because right now we've been living in a status quo of ambiguity. Right. And so people just aren't sure what's in bounds, what's out of bounds in many cases with this technology when it does novel things. And so that's the real issue. So this new asset class has been developed, digital assets, and these great new pieces of technology that enable powerful new things like self custody of digital value and self-driven transferability and coordination with people you don't know in this unique and very powerful way. And people, of course, in a new space want to build solutions that help regular people do the things that they want to do with this technology. And when people are building these solutions, it's hard to know exactly where they stand with the law. Right now, there is a status quo that it aims to sort of oversee some of these industry participants. But in the United States, it's essentially cobbled together by a variety of state frameworks, most of which were designed for a time before digital assets. They use these things, money transmissions licenses, in order to have some level of registration and oversight. And so a lot of the larger, even very large national companies in the US are actually registered at all these different state levels by this, money transmissions license
Hmm.
framework, which just has nothing to do with digital assets. And so it's difficult. And then there are a few states that have been very forward looking and put the time and resources into developing state level frameworks, which are pretty robust or can be pretty robust and comprehensive. And then companies that may be national or international will then need to go and register at the state level. So, and they may
Okay.
have slightly different regulations. So it creates
Hmm.
this difficulty in piecing together what's in bounds, what's out of bounds, what's good here versus what's good here, and then the federal level with Treasury, the SEC, the CFTC, and others. Who is my primary regulator,
Hmm.
and which regulations apply directly to me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And why is there value in bringing companies together through a coalition rather than having each company make its own case to policymakers?
Yeah, and I think there's value in both. Sometimes when you have a specific thing that you do, it's great to make your voice heard. As I said, even individuals who have information or ideas about how something should
Hmm.
go, I think should make themselves a part of the process. But in a place like crypto, where that's big and can be noisy and is filled with people with a wide variety of opinions and use cases and experiences, it can be hard. We are actually advocating to a finite group of people. There's 435 members of the House. There's 100 members of the Senate, and they have X number of staff. And you have to actually talk to these individual people. And so
Yeah.
if they're hearing, there's only so many hours in the day, and so hearing from a full ecosystem can be very difficult. And so when there are opportunities to forge consensus and to speak with a unified voice, then it's really beneficial. And so I'll also say, so there's CCI, but there's also our sort of our peer-like organizations that who we work very closely with.
Hmm.
And whenever possible, especially on really big issues, we look to collaborate and again speak with an even.
Okay, awesome. And what do you focus on right now? You mentioned market structure. What are policymakers trying to solve when they talk about that? Like, what does it actually mean in plain English?
Yeah, sure. Again, they're trying to solve for that ambiguity.
Hmm.
And that's especially at the federal the federal regulator level. So in
Okay.
particular, so I'll speak a little bit broader than market structure, and then I'll go into market structure. We kind of there's this image kind of circulating around in DC crypto policy circles of a puzzle, and there are these puzzle pieces, and the puzzle is crypto regulatory framework. So there is stable coins. We
Hmm.
got that done last year with the passage of the Genius Act. Then there's digital commodities, digital securities, and tax for digital assets. Digital commodities and securities are both in this idea of market structure, and we're working on that. And the vehicle is this piece of legislation, the Clarity Act.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're looking to pass this, and in particular, what it does is it regulates digital securities, which will be overseen by the Securities Exchange Commission. And, this deals with lots of information disclosure from individual projects and the way that they raise money, the way that they issue or disseminate securities uh,
Mm-hmm.
and tokens, and what level of control different people have within that system. And the commodities piece, um, to be overseen by the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, deals with assets that are, regulated as commodities. So these
Mm-hmm.
are things like Bitcoin, Ethereum, or likely a very long tail of assets, including many assets in the digital assets ecosystem. And so how can individuals trade these assets? And in particular, what are the duties and the responsibilities of the intermediaries, the companies that facilitate the trading, the custody, the brokering of these assets?
Okay. Gosh, our time has flown by. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we haven't covered? I feel like I did have quite a few more questions, but yeah, we've just run out of time.
Yeah, so I've been very long-winded. So
No, it's been great though. It's been so interesting.
good.
Yeah.
And I think I can I can go over a little bit, but I'm sure you have something else in your schedule.
Yeah, I'm good.
Let's see. No, I don't really have anything else. I'm
Okay,
happy to
cool.
answer another question if you like.
Yeah, I did have another one. I'm curious as to, I guess, what if you have like a favorite thing you love about working in this space, and then if there's one thing you'd want to change, or like or something, you find challenging. I just always interested and yeah, I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, a favorite thing is just how um well, I think, okay, from like a legislative standpoint, it's much more interesting to work on net new issues, right?
Mm,
So we are going to work on and advocate for and craft brand new legislation that's going to have a
mm,
huge impact for years and decades to come. Whereas in many areas, if you're working on legislation, you might be really working on something that is very old. You're
mm-hmm.
making very, very small updates, or in some cases, just looking to defend the status quo and not really looking to make change. And so
Yeah.
professionally and intellectually, this is much more interesting.
Mm,
And then the crypto ecosystem in particular, I love because it is so broad, and there are people who have expertise in such a big amount of wide amount of issues, from civil liberties
mm-hmm.
to people who purely care about the efficiency and power of the technology,
Mm,
to people who care deeply about bringing financial access to millions more people all over the world, and how
mm-hmm.
they can really help folks through that process. And people care about business innovation and new business models. So it really is, it's a very big tent that is can be a little bit boisterous sometimes,
Uh-huh.
but that's also really exciting.
Yeah, I wonder, like, I mean, how often does that happen where legislation is being created for something totally new? Is that quite a rarity in this space? Is it
Yeah.
mostly just sort of tweaking older legislation or trying to solve problems that have existed for a while with like a new approach?
Yeah, exactly. I think that, I'm not an expert on the exact statistics of bills that are passed
Mm-hmm.
every year, but
Yeah.
yes, many of them are um, either have to do with money appropriating dollars from the government to be spent in certain types of ways,
Mm-hmm.
or tweaking things that exist and upgrading systems that have been in place for a long time. And
Hmm.
that's part of, to be frank, that's part of what market structure process is. Making updates to the securities and commodities defining legislation. Many of uh, these bills originally are almost 100 years old. And so we are updating those, but it is because that there's this fundamentally new way of solving, financial coordination problems.
Hmm.
And so that's really exciting. You have people in, like the AI world as well, who are also
Hmm.
working on
Oh, yes.
net new
Hmm.
ideas
Yeah.
and trying to figure out legislative
Hmm.
solutions, for things there. And so there's a couple of things right now. We're in a particularly dynamic time, especially
Hmm.
regarding technology in our nation's history. And so there's a
Yeah.
lot of new ideas needed,
Hmm.
which is really exciting.
Yeah, that's incredible. It's like being a part of history, I guess. Yeah, I did a bit of law in high school, and this was in the UK. But yeah, I remember our teacher saying that there was still like a lot of laws that were technically there's still laws, but they just are outdated. Things
Yeah, right.
like about witchcraft and things that
Sure.
and these really old things that technically, that it's still law, but everyone's just sort of, ignores them now because no one's been bothered to go and I don't know what it's called when you just like get rid of a law, but like either update it or get rid of it. But yeah, he liked to sort of highlight all these random obscure laws that were still in place, like from the olden
It's so
days.
funny.
So yeah, I always remembered that. I thought that was funny. But yeah, like I guess law goes back a long way. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, yeah, the law is, obviously you can have a intense, protracted philosophical discussion about
Hmm.
sort of what law is and what the role it plays in our society and those who get to, or have the responsibility to draft and create and implement and enact new laws. But it's very
Hmm.
powerful. It's very important. But I think of it as, really codifying the, um, our shared sense of values and
Hmm.
priorities.
Yeah.
And, there are these things the country cares about, and it's legislators' job and everyone in the broader ecosystem who is around them. It's our job to make sure that we're getting as close to the truth and as close to our shared priorities as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this was such a great conversation. I really appreciate you coming on the show. I definitely learned a lot, and it's really fascinating getting an insight into this part of this area, this industry that you're in, and how things work. Where can people go to find out more or connect with yourself?
Yeah, sure. Lots of places. I think that a good place to find me is on X. I'm just at Rashan. Pretty straightforward, Rashan. And then to learn more about Crypto Council for Innovation, our website is cryptoforinovation.org.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you again, Rashan. It was such an interesting chat, and yeah, thanks for everything that you were doing with the Crypto Council of Innovation and for the industry.
Absolutely. No, Lindsay, thanks so much for having me. It's been been a fun conversation.
Awesome. Yeah, such a pleasure. Okay, so that's it for today's episode of Token for Your Thoughts. If you enjoyed the conversation, be sure to follow the podcast and stay tuned for more interviews with the people shaping the industry and our future. We'll see you on the next episode.